All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by ROLLERCOASTERWORDS. Chapter 11, First Year, Birthdays, Books, and the Beatles. Madame Pomfrey gave them a stern lecture on misusing magic before sending them on their way, which seemed to irk everyone except for Remus. As if we wanted to look like Bigfoot, James scoffed. Peter mumbled, yeah, in his usual fashion of echoing everything James said. Remus just stared straight ahead, looking unusually shaken by the whole situation. Sirius was still seething. It had to be Severus. He coated the sweets in one of his potions, I know it. Yeah, we all know it, mate. James shook his head. Don't worry, we'll get them back. I'm so sorry, Peter moaned. He hadn't stopped apologizing since they left the hall, and it made Sirius want to strangle him. I really thought they were from my mum. It's fine, Peter, James said benevolently. Just wish you'd given them to us first thing on Monday. I demand retribution, Sirius shouted, raising his wand dramatically. James laughed, and surprisingly, so did Remus. And you shall have it, James matched Sirius's melodramatic tone, grinning. Patience is virtue, Black. Vengeance like this takes time. Don't suppose you've got any other brilliant ideas, Remus? Sorry, Remus shook his head. He had perked up a bit, but his skin was still quite pale, and he kept darting glances at his hands as if worried that the hair would start sprouting again. I'll help you, James, Peter said eagerly. I'll do anything. I won't be scared this time. They had just began to turn the corner that led to the Gryffindor Tower when someone behind them shouted, Sirius? All four boys turned, and Sirius's heart leapt into his throat. Bellatrix. She had always been his least favourite cousin, close enough in age that he had grown up with her tormenting him, but old enough to make him feel small. She stared at him now with her nose turned up, as if he was a particularly disgusting flubberworm that she was about to step on. What do you want? Sirius asked, trying to sound nonchalant even as he hunched instinctively. Drawing his shoulders closer to his ears, James stepped forward, standing at his side, and Sirius felt very grateful for his friend. Come here and address me properly, Bella snapped, voice icy. Sirius stayed stubbornly in place until she withdrew her wand, which he knew from experience that she wouldn't hesitate to use. Come here! Her voice was low now and dangerous. Or I'll make you. And it won't be a childish little hair growth charm, I promise. Sirius slumped forward, shaking his head wordlessly at James when his friend moved with him. It was embarrassing enough that the other boys were watching this dressing down from his family, especially James. That's better, Bellatrix tutted as he shuffled closer to her. Sirius fiddled with his wand, glaring at the ground. He wished his palms weren't so clammy. I'd heard you're running around with blood traitors and mudbloods now. I always thought you were an idiot, but even I'm surprised that you'd come to this much of a disgrace. You're still a Black, let's remind you. You could stand to have some dignity. Sirius flushed, glad she wasn't speaking loudly enough for his friends to hear. Or at least, he hoped she wasn't. I mean, really, your actions don't only reflect on you, Sirius. You're making the entire family look bad. Do you have any idea how I feel, knowing my pea-brained cousin is mucking about like some muggle-loving... For Pete's sake, Bella, what do you want? Sirius snapped, and regretted it immediately when she levelled an icy stare at him, sending a chill down his spine. Your parents are concerned about you, she sniffed. They want to make sure that you aren't losing sight of your roots. Sissy and I have kindly offered to have tea with you on your birthday in the Slytherin common room. Am I understood? Sirius wanted to sink into the floor. Tea with his cousins was about the worst way he could think to spend his birthday. Anger bit through him, mixing with the hot flush of shame he felt as he listened to Bellatrix's voice. Every secret fear he'd held since the sorting. Disgrace, disappointment, embarrassment. When he didn't respond, she spat his name. Sirius! He looked up, attempting a belligerent gaze. It didn't seem very effective, though. He was still a mess of emotions. I said, am I understood? Yes, he murmured, looking back at the floor. Good. Bellatrix patted his head, and Sirius fought the urge to duck away from her touch. Now run along with your little blood traitor friends. She turned on her heel and left, robes sweeping behind her. Sirius walked back slowly, nerves on edge, chest still boiling with frustration, anxiety, and shame. None of them said a single word until they returned to the common room. It wasn't until they were seated on their usual sofa that James broke the silence. "All right, Sirius?" "Yeah," he nodded, making a valiant effort at nonchalance. She wanted to invite me for tea on my birthday. I think my mother must have made her. Probably held a family conference, tried to bring me back into the fold. Just because you were in a different house?" Sirius smirked. "And the company I'm keeping." "So when's your birthday?" 2 weeks, the 3rd. I have to go for this tea, though. Belle's not joking about knowing some really vile curses. "We'll do something afterwards, then. Something good, yeah?" Peter and Remus both nodded enthusiastically, and Sirius felt a surge of gratitude for his friend. Wednesday, the 3rd of November, 1971. Happy birthday! Sirius woke to James Potter, the heir of one of the oldest pure-blood families in Britain, flinging himself headlong into his friend's bed. He tackled Sirius, and the two started wrestling through the blankets, laughing. When Sirius finally managed to shove James off and step out of bed, he noticed Peter standing nervously across the room. "Happy birthday, Sirius!" "Cheers, Pete!" Sirius grinned and looked over towards Remus's bed. It was empty, the curtains left open, and the bed still made. "He, never got back last night," James said, when he saw Sirius looking. There was a moment of tense silence as they all looked at the empty bed, noting yet another disappearance from their friend. Where did he keep going? Finally, Sirius shrugged, saying with forced cheer, "Probably off plotting the downfall of the Slytherins. Evil genius, that one." James and Peter chuckled, also a bit forced, and they all silently agreed not to talk about it. Classes were a drag, but James and Peter made it fun. They acted as if Sirius was royalty the entire day, holding doors for him, carrying his books, even leaping out of their seats to bow at him when he managed to transfigure his goldfish before anyone else in the class, which McGonagall did not find amusing. After lunch, James surprised Sirius with a flying lesson. Apparently, he had gotten Madam Hooch's good side. The three of them sped across the pitch, wind biting at their faces and stealing the laughter off their lips. Sirius was having such a good time that he almost forgot about his appointment with his cousins. Almost. But as the deadline loomed closer, he grew more and more nervous. James managed to cheer him up again at dinner, leading the entire Gryffindor table in a round of happy birthday, followed by "For he's a jolly good fellow." The rowdy Gryffindors continued to sing "And so say all of us" over and over again, voices rising each time, until Professor McGonagall finally threatened to give the whole house detention if they didn't stop. Tea with his cousins was just as bad as he expected it to be. He felt awkward and out of place in the Slytherin common room, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He was even more acutely aware of the fact that these people would have been his friends, and this would have been his home if things had gone as they should. It was jarring, seeing a future he would never have laid out before him. The entire time, Bellatrix kept up the steady stream of underhanded and overhanded insults, barbed jokes, and petty jabs about how much a disappointment Sirius was becoming. Sissy didn't speak much, except to agree with her sister. Privately, Sirius wondered if they were just relieved that the attention had turned away from their immediate family and onto his. Sirius had been fairly young when Andromeda had run off to marry a Muggle, but he remembered Narcissa and Bellatrix idolizing their big sister when they were little kids. He had never asked Andromeda about it directly, but he knew Bellatrix, in particular, felt betrayed. The summer they received the wedding announcement, Bella had set her sister's room ablaze in fury, burning everything Andromeda had left behind. Neither Narcissa nor Bellatrix had spoken to their older sister since. In fact, Sirius was pretty sure that he was the only person in the family who was still in contact with Andromeda. She had taught him how to use the Muggle post, since his parents didn't understand the concept of a post office. Sirius couldn't imagine anything ever coming between him and Reg like that. In fact, before he left to return to his own common room, he had even made an attempt to ask about his brother. It was after another tangent from Bellatrix about how awful it was to have to tell their dear aunt the heir of the Black House was now befriending blood traitors. She writes to you, then? Bellatrix rolled her eyes. Obviously. It's not as if you can be trusted to be honest about your situation. And you too, Sissy. It's Narcissa. Do you reckon you could maybe, send a letter to Reg for me? Narcissa's gaze faltered as she was caught off guard. For a moment, her brow furrowed, and she started to say, "Well, absolutely not," Bellatrix sneered. "As if he needs any of your influence right now. Honestly, Sirius, all you have to do is grow up and learn to behave with maturity, and I'm sure your parents will give your owl back." She shook her head. Sirius flushed. "Right," he muttered. "Don't know why I even bothered asking." He left as soon as he could, seething all the way back to the Gryffindor common room. Neither of his cousins had wished him a happy birthday. He arrived just before curfew. As he stepped into their room to get ready for bed, he came face to face with Remus. They stared at each other for a moment, and then, "Happy birthday, mate," Remus smiled weakly, looking a bit guilty. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his skin was shallow, like he had been up all night. "Thanks," Sirius blinked, a bit surprised, and smiled back. "Where were you?" "Got sick," Remus mumbled. "Pomfrey made me stay in the hospital wing all day." It seemed a bit odd for an illness to come on so suddenly. Sirius wondered if there had been something Remus wasn't telling them, especially as this wasn't his first disappearance. But none of the boys questioned the explanation, and the next morning there were classes to get to, essays to write, and pranks to plan, and so many other things to think about. As winter approached, the boys spent less time outside, preferring to work huddled around the fire in the common room. When Sirius wasn't spending time with James and Peter, who never seemed to leave his side, he was reading with Remus. It took them just under 2 weeks to finish A History of Magic, and Sirius then started alternating between a beginner's guide to Transfiguration and magical drafts and potions. He even started reading aloud when they worked on their homework in a group, although it led to scowling from James, who preferred silence. "It helps me think, Potter." James would puff out his lip, pouting. "I've got to catch up to you somehow." This appealed to James's pride, as well as his instinct to help those in need. Usually worked, as it was true that James had now pulled quite ahead of Sirius in all their classes. Although Sirius let his friend believe that it was because he had been drastically and rapidly improving, that wasn't necessarily the case. James had been getting better, but not that much better. The truth was that Sirius had decided that he no longer cared about schoolwork. It was so easy anyway. He could get a passable grade without studying or taking notes, and do better than half the class if he bothered to glance over his books. And Bellatrix made it very clear during his birthday that something like good marks would never be enough to win his parents back. What did it matter if he came top of the class, if the class was full of Gryffindors? So Sirius found another way to occupy his time, namely, researching. Ever since they had started reading together, Remus's marks skyrocketed, and Sirius was sure that if he could figure out the right spell, the boy could be a genius in no time. Sirius spent most of the time in the library, looking over conjunctive interpretation spells that were supposed to be owl level, but didn't seem too complicated once he grasped the basics. It was much more interesting than his classwork anyway. Remus started to grow more comfortable around the other boys as well, and around Sirius especially. He began to spend more time with them and stopped sneaking off on his own so much. He even started to share his musical knowledge with Sirius, revealing that he had actually seen the Beatles perform. Remus knew all about Muggles, and patiently weathered Sirius's many questions. By the end of the month, Sirius truly felt as though they had become fast friends. Well, Peter got on his nerves sometimes. A lot of the time. But that was to be expected. The Marauders would end most nights around the fire in the common room, plotting pranks and playing games of gobstones or exploding snap, laughing until their sides hurt before trudging upstairs to bed.